Hi, it's Penny here. Welcome to my channel where I mostly talk about books. And if you don't know, I am from New Zealand. So I thought today I would share some of my most favorite New Zealand authors and New Zealand books. Most of these are fantasy and science fiction. I am going to start with children's books and pretty picture books, so if you don't like fun, maybe skip the first bit. I will leave timestamps down below and chapters and all that. And I do kind of have a top 10 here, but there were a couple I couldn't fit into the top 10, but I still want to mention. Firstly, we have this Maui and Other Maori Legends by Peter Gossage. So this is kind of a New Zealand classic. I mean, when I grew up, admittedly, that was a long time ago, these were always in primary schools, and I assume they still would be. Basically, it's just a bunch of retelling of Maori myth and legends, including like Maui trapping the sun and a bunch of other really cool ones. I love the art. I love the retellings. It's just a really great book, and I'm so glad to have this in my library. The other one I couldn't fit into the list is Detective Beans and the Case of the Missing Hat. So this was a recent read for me. I read it just last year, and I think it was just released last year. It's just a cute little story about this cat boy who pretends that he's a detective, but his detective hat goes missing, and he ends up kind of going on an adventure through town trying to chase this hat down as it's been passed kind of from person to person. The art is really bright and colorful and fun. It's full of like wholesome messages and lessons and great jokes. I laughed so much, and I'm really looking forward to more from Lee Chen in the future. Okay, then at number 10 I have a very popular author, and that is Kay O'Neill. So most people will know them because of their Tea Dragon Society books, maybe also Aquacorn Cove. I think their first one was Princess Ever After, and more recently they did release Mothkeeper. So the art in all their books is really beautiful, and there's lots of like really lovely creatures, but also a lot of characters being kind and like a lot of self-reflection, and again just like wholesome messages and lessons, like kind of cozy books where young people are working through different issues, and beautiful pictures while we're at it. Then at number 9 we have Margaret Mahy. So I think she's written like 100 younger children's books, picture book type things, but my favorites by Margaret Mahy are always her like more YA novels where there tends to be like a darker thing going on. Of these two that I own, we have The Changeover, which is like this young girl trying to look after her younger brother, but they get involved in this like witchy horror thing going on. I didn't like the supernatural romance of this story, but like the horror of her trying to look after her younger brother and running into this horribleness was something I did really enjoy. And then the other one that I really love is Madigan's Quest, or it was actually originally published as Madigan's Fantasia, but then there was a TV show based on this called Madigan's Quest, and I really love the TV show. They did a really amazing job of like incorporating Maori language, but also like all the actors are great, like a lot of well-known New Zealand actors in that show. It's a post-apocalyptic world, and we're following this like circus group as they travel from town to town. And while they're doing that though, they come across these two young boys who say they're from a future where things have gone really wrong, and so they're trying to work with them to fix things up. I do remember it's kind of written quite serially, like lots of little adventures, but also the bigger story comes together really well. I love this. And there is actually another novel by Margaret Mahy called The Haunting, which I haven't read. I definitely want to read it because I think I remember watching like this movie version of it called The Haunting of Barney Palmer, and I have actually found that that is available to watch online as well, so that's a definite exciting reading project for me in the future. But if you want some spooky like YA books targeted at a slightly younger YA kind of audience, then you might want to check out those books by Margaret Mahy. Then at number 8 we have Steph Matuku. So let's talk about her books from like the youngest target audience to the oldest. So she did write this cute little children's book, The Dream Factory, which is just about this dream factory, obviously, that makes lovely dreams, but then this naughty, where is he? Naughty Keroro messes everything up, messes everyone's dreams up, and has to fix it. It's just a really short little children's book, but the art is beautiful. I also really love their Whetutoa series, where this young girl named Whetutoa moves with her mother to live at this magician's house because he needs the mother to be his personal assistant because his life is a disaster. And Whetu ends up helping out with the farm animals, the kind of like magical farm animals that he owns. And the stories are so fun and entertaining, but also really smart and appropriate, like a lot of appropriate lessons for the target age range. I think for all of Steph Matuku's stuff, like they're so entertaining and fun. I always blast through all of these very quickly. So I also liked Falling into Rarohenga. This probably wasn't my favorite. It's probably targeted at young teens. The chapters are honestly like 1 or 2 pages each, so it reads very fast. It's these twin teenagers arrive home just as their mother is being pulled into a portal into Rarohenga, like the Maori underworld. And I really liked everything that I learned about Maori mythology from this book, while also still just, again, being super entertained by a fast-paced family story. Then Flight of the Fantail by her as well is like a YA horror with a little bit of a sci-fi twist. So basically these teens are on a bus for a school trip going through the middle of nowhere when they crash. Only a few of them survive, and then they're just fighting to survive as things are a little bit weird. I really love the New Zealand feel of this. That's one thing I really love getting from New Zealand authors, is like the New Zealand things and the New Zealand vibes that you just don't get from books that are published in other places. I do still have one more book from Steph Matuku to read, so that is Migration, which is like a YA dystopian. I'm hoping to get to this month, and I'm hoping it will be just as fun and smart as everything else I've read by Steph Matuku. Then at number 6 we have Philippa Ballentine, although admittedly I probably need a reread of all of these books, so my synopsises probably won't be that great. But firstly, Weather Child. This is a book they published independently because in it there's like these creatures that will bond with New Zealanders only and give them certain powers, and like some of these people really get along with these creatures, others not so much, but there's like an organization trying to use these powers for evil. So Philippa Ballentine said at the time she couldn't find anyone to publish it because people were like, no one's going to want to read a story about New Zealanders having magical powers. I don't know though, I think given some other books later on this list that could be quite popular. Anyway, I really like this, even though I will admit sometimes the writing is a little bit, I just wish it had had a bit more editing. There's a few like typos in here as well. I think if it had been well edited it could have been amazing, but still the overall story is amazing and I really enjoyed reading it. It's kind of set post World War II in Wellington, which I don't think is a setting that I've ever read another book in. So there's that. Her other series is the Book of the Order series. So there's like a religious order, I think, or like, I think there's always a pair, a priest and a mage, and they work to keep creatures from the afterlife, like ghosts and specters and stuff, keep them on the other side, because when they come through they can be very dangerous. But slowly throughout this series our main characters are learning about a lot of corruption and secrets in the world. They do also meet up at some point with this prince who's been cursed to be a shapeshifter and like can't control himself turning into a lion sometimes, and there's a bit of a romance there. But I think what I most enjoyed is what the main character learns about herself and like the bigger corruption going on in the world. This series I definitely need a reread, which I'm hoping to do this year. I have put it on my bigger TBR. I will say there are some other things that Philippa Ballentine has written that are very steampunky. So if you like steampunky, they might be for you. Steampunky books, especially with that like Victorian feel, don't tend to work for me. So I think I tried one and I DNF'd it. And so as that's been the direction Philippa Ballentine's been focusing on, I haven't read anything else by her, but the ones that I have read, I really loved. Then at number 6 we have Whiti Hereaka. So she actually mostly writes contemporary YA stories set in New Zealand, and that's like contemporary YA isn't usually my thing, although she does have one book which I think has time travel in it and maybe is a little bit like a New Zealand version of Kindred. Maybe. I do have that on my TBR. I'll give that a go. But this book is one that's much more creative and different and so unique. And I'm really interested to see if she'll go in the direction of writing more books like this or not. So basically this book is written in a way where you can start it from either side. So it's called Matuku, and it is a retelling of the Maori myth Hatupatu and the Bird Woman, except it's the Bird Woman's story rather than Hatupatu's story, because Hatupatu's a little shit. But the middle of the book actually has a retelling of Hatupatu and the Bird Woman from the Bird Woman's perspective, I think. Oh, maybe not. I'm not sure. But because that's in the middle from whatever direction you come from, you end up with, in the middle of the book, like one page being upside down and one page being up the right way. It's kind of the same story in the middle from whatever direction you come from. And so then the main story on this side kind of tells you about her death and her trip through the underworld, and then this one tells you about her creation and her life. But it's all very circular, so you could almost just keep reading this forever and never stop. I did on my first read start on this side. I think next time I'm going to start from this side. And I will admit, there were some parts in this that are 5 stars amazing. I loved the lyrical writing and the ideas. So great. There were some other bits that the style really wasn't for me, and bits where it was quite brutal and just not as enjoyable. But like as an overall piece of art, I love this book. So then at number 5 we have Lee Murray. This is the 3rd book in the trilogy by her that I really love. It's kind of a military creature horror, which isn't what I would have expected to love, but I think what I love about this is the atmosphere and like that building of anxiety, but also the character development and again that New Zealand feel. So what tends to happen in each of these books is we have some people from the military, especially one particular character, and honestly his presence really makes me want these books to be like made into action films. I think it could be really great. But we also have like just some general civilians, usually some people from the Department of Conservation, and also always some criminals up to no good, because we need some people to die, you know. So also these books are usually set in the middle of nowhere in New Zealand, which is already kind of horrifying because as soon as things start going wrong, you're like completely out of contact. So there's no help coming except for whatever's there. So I love these books, the action, the character relationships, and also the way that Maori mythology was incorporated. Just so good. As far as Lee Murray goes, I do also have The Path of Ra by them on my TBR. They wrote that with another New Zealand author, Dan Rabbits. I mentioned that, or I tried the first chapter of that in my Try a Chapter video that I did recently, which I'll link around the place if you want to check that out and see some New Zealand authors that I haven't read yet but might be future favourite New Zealand authors. In fact, I'm pretty sure some of them will be. So Path of Ra by Lee Murray is in that video. I'm not sure I'm going to love it quite as much as this one, but there's hope. Then at number 4 we have another really popular well-known author, and that is Juliet Marillier. So she tends to write really emotional fantasy romance with a bit of a Celtic and Fae influence. The ones that I have read is the Seven Waters series by her. I especially love Daughter of the Forest, and also the second book, I think it's called Son of Shadows. I did think I didn't enjoy the future books in the series as much, but the first book was so good. It's kind of a like Seven Swans retelling where this girl's brothers are all turned into swans, and she has to weave these horrible nettles, and like that's really horrible to do, but she has to do that in order to get her brothers turned back from swans. But while she's doing that, she's also not allowed to speak, and also while she's doing that, she gets kidnapped. However, the guy that kidnaps her isn't necessarily a bad person, hence the romance, but just the whole experience is so awful and emotional, and it's quite a slow story. It starts out very slow and it took me a while to get into it, but once I did, I was just 100% invested. I bawled my eyes out. It's great. And actually the Seven Waters books basically follow through different women throughout the generations of a single family. And I did also try the first chapter of another series by Juliet Marillier in that Try a Chapter video I mentioned, Blackthorn and Grimm, and I'm very excited about picking that one up. Then at number 3 we have JP Pomare. So he is a thriller writer. I think the only non-fantasy author on this list. Yeah. And I often don't pick up thrillers these days just because even though I can like them, I find it really hard to identify which ones I'm going to like. But JP Pomare is always reliable. I love the way that he sets up the mystery. I think part of what I like about thrillers is when they have a good mystery, and he does that so well, like just seeding all the different clues and then having them come together in such a satisfying way where like everything was relevant but also wasn't what you expected. And then he also often has such a great like intensity build up at the end, so you really do get that thrillingness. I've really loved the last few books I've read by him. I'm not sure if there were some I liked less, but anyway, the latest one I read, 17 Years Later, which I think is his latest release, loved it. And I think the only one I haven't read by him is The Wrong Woman, which I think he released last year, the year before. Anyway, somehow I missed it. I'm going to pick it up really soon, and I'm sure it's going to be great. Then at number 2, we have A.C. Buchanan, who I think also has been publishing more recently as Andi C. Buchanan. So they're an autistic, non-binary author, and a lot of their characters are the same. So some good examples of that I have really loved is This Other World, which is like a sci-fi where this autistic woman has really found a place she feels like she belongs on another planet, but she's just kind of being introduced to this thing they do with their elders where you join like a communal consciousness, which is kind of struggling with the idea of. But just as this is happening, there's like a bigger conflict happening with their neighboring city and some weirdness going on with the psychic abilities related to that. And it was just such a great story, some really great themes, and I think like really relatable real characters. They also have Sanctuary, which is a story set in Wellington, kind of like this communal flat of people with different neurodivergences, but also our main character is like a ghost protector. So they have several ghosts living in the flat as well, and I really loved the way that it compared kind of these ghosts' special needs to the needs of people with different neurodivergences, and just the way that we learned about this found family living in this flat and how they dealt with kind of this ghost murder mystery that ends up happening. Like, I think if you like cozy found families where they're very supportive of each other and also like supportive of each other's particular needs, then this is a really great one. As well, I do have From a Shadow Grave, which is like just a little short story novella thing, which had a little bit of time travel and I think was also set in Wellington, but over time. This is just a short one, but I really loved the strangeness and just the interesting ideas in it. And then another series by A.C. Buchanan, or Andi C. Buchanan, that hasn't really been my favorite, but I think a lot of people could love, is their Windflower series. So this is like a cozy fantasy, again, set in Wellington, which is where Andi lives. So basically just following a bunch of little witches learning about their powers and like growing succulents and researching snails and all those kind of things, but also having a little bit of dramas with their magic. But again, cozy, low stakes. That was the problem for me. I don't tend to like cozy, low stakes, but I still like this first one. I just got a bit bored of it after that, but I think if you like cozy, you could like these. I know a lot of people do really love them. Okay, then at number 1, we have an author that I've only just recently read and I love them with my whole heart, and that is Tamsyn Muir, the author of the Locked Tomb series, so Gideon the Ninth, Harrow the Ninth, and Nona the Ninth, and hopefully, sometime soon, Alecto the Ninth, hopefully. So these books are just super weird, but also like packed full of those New Zealand feelings that I'm always looking for. The series is really just about necromancers in space, but the books get like progressively weirder and weirder, and any plot summary is completely lacking in an actual explanation because you can't explain what these books are about without spoilers. They're just super weird, and if you love them, you're going to love them. And that's me. I love them. So hopefully we'll get book 4 sometime soon, and then maybe more and more from Tamsyn Muir in the future. Then as a bonus, I did want to mention one more potential favorite New Zealand author, and that is H.G. Parry. I didn't mention it because I haven't read these yet, but they are on my TBR for the month. And I also didn't try them in that try a chapter video because I already have this series on my TBR, so I want to read this before I try anything else by them. But This series starts with a declaration of the rights of magicians and continues, it's just a duology with a radical act of free magic. And this is a series about a world kind of like a industrial England, I think, or I think it might be more spread out across all of Europe. But anyway, basically only the nobles are allowed to do magic, and if any common people do magic, even if they didn't know that that was the case, they will be enslaved. And we're following kind of some commoners who that has happened to, as well as some young nobles who are very passionate about improving the law. So I did try the first chapter of this quite a while now, and I'm excited to finally get to it. I have a very good feeling about H.G. Parry being a favourite, because I do also have some other books by her that I'd like to try as well. So that is all my favourite New Zealand authors. Let me know if you've read any of them and if you've loved them too. Or let me know if there's any other New Zealand authors that you think I should be trying, or ones that you love. I would love to chat with you about them down in the comments. Do subscribe if you'd like to see more of my bookish videos. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you are doing well, and I will see you next time.